Welcome to Manager Tools. The Effective Hiring Manager Missing Chapters, Reducing Interviewee Stress, Part 2. This cast answers these questions. How stressful should interviews be? How can I determine if candidates can handle stress? What can I do to reduce interview process stress? Well, if you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening. Here we go.
Folks, don't forget to listen to this podcast that we do conferences all over the States and in Europe and in Asia throughout the year. If you want to know more about managing, communicating, and hiring, come to our website and look. We'll be in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, January 28th and 29th of this year, 2020, start of a new decade, with our Effective Manager Conference and our Effective Communicator Conference. Come see us in Raleigh-Durham.
Okay, Mark, part 2 of this series, folks. If you haven't listened to part 1, I recommend that you go and do so. Otherwise, you won't know the why of the things we're talking about here. So go back and listen to it if you haven't listened to part 1. And Mark, thank you for being here today. You're sick, folks. If you haven't, once you hear him, you'll know.
I was thinking about this. That this may be the longest gap in recording a 2-part podcast. We did the first part, and then we decided we had some commitments we needed to get to. And seems like it's been a month or more since we recorded this podcast.
Well, that was on purpose, just to keep the anticipation strong, right? Just, tease them with the whys, and then we'll give you the answer a month later.
Yeah, guys, this is why Mike's the straight man.
He's not funny.
Yeah, neither am I. So look, part 1, we talked about why interviewing stress is ineffective. We shared our data about false positives and false negatives. And if your false positives and false negatives increase on a known candidate pool, then by definition, your true positives and true negatives go down. And that's not good. And interviewing takes time and it's expensive. So what can we do throughout the process to reduce stress that's unnecessary and is misleading in terms of the outcomes we get from the process?
Right. And that's a key point from last week, right? That there is a natural stress, but the unnatural stress that interviewers tend to use these days creates stress that is not indicative of whether the person's going to be a good candidate or not, or whether they'll work effectively in normal stress that occurs in the workplace.
Yeah, we've said this many, many times that most people's preparation to be an interviewer is being an interviewee. And yet, vaguely like the Stanford prison experiment, hey, if you have a chance to be in power, what are you going to do? You're going to take advantage of that power. And you're going to say, woo, I felt stress, so let's put some stress on these candidates. Without knowing, without studying, without being aware that it doesn't help. There's enough stress on the candidates. We don't need to make it worse, not just because we're nice, we're good people, and we're going to have to sit next to these people for perhaps years, but because it's ineffective, as we've said.
That's the key, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the stressors that could happen and things you can do to reduce stressors both before you interview, when you interview, and after you interview. Look, if a candidate knows his or her resume is being looked at, notify them if you've decided not to include them in the next step in the process, which usually would be after a resume screen, a phone screen. Now, for many of you, you're saying, wait, I've never done that. That's because in the majority of cases, candidates, interviewees don't know that their resume is on the pile to be considered. On the other hand, if it's a referral, if it's an internal candidate, if it's somebody who does know their resume is in the pile, but they don't get a phone screen, and therefore they don't know the phone screens are happening, so therefore they don't know they're not in it, you owe them a phone call or an email. If you have a good relationship with them, you got to call them or you got to do it face-to-face. You don't have to tell them why. We've said that before. Other than perhaps other candidates appear to be more qualified. So You can do that by email. If it's an internal candidate, you need to at least know roughly, maybe ask around, what your organization's notification or internal talent market process recommendations are. Gosh, if they know the person, look, if you know the person, I don't care what the company's internal talent market steps are. If you've decided not to take him to interview, you got to have a phone call or you got to have a face to face.
Yeah. Relationships matter. And this person is not going away, right?
Yeah. Jobs change. People change. You may run into these people at a hallway, at a party. They may become your boss someday.
Oh, that's awkward.
Yeah. I mean, come on. Smile at people on your way up because you're going to see them on your way back down. Treat others the way you would want to be treated. If a buddy of yours had your resume on a pile out of 10 and she decided that she was going to go forward with 3 and you weren't in that 3, what do you expect from her? A phone call. Hey, look, Mark, I'm really sorry. Looked at the resume. It's excellent. And we've got 3 that are super excellent. And we're going to start with them. I'm not saying you're out. I think, though, if we could hire one of these 3 people, we probably will. Love you, man, but hey, didn't work out this time. Now, I got to tell you, the person who responds to that with some snark, they're the one doing damage to the relationship, not the hiring manager who's choosing not to move forward with a buddy. If you have a relationship with someone, generally speaking, particularly if you're outside the company, all you owe them is an introduction. You don't owe them an interview. You owe their resume in front of the right person with a recommendation. That's it. If your buddy who's hiring doesn't like your other buddy, you've acquitted yourself of your responsibility. Now, look, there are people who would say, well, gosh, I guess you didn't have as much power. That logic gets us to the point that only people who can touch someone on the head and say you're hired should consider any sort of referrals. But the process for getting hired is a series of increasingly higher hurdles. And if you can get one of your friends over one of the first hurdles, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? The problem is when people don't get what they want, they get a little bit frustrated and they say, well, gee, why didn't I get an interview? Why didn't I get the next step? And so on. And they're just showing their naivety, their lack of knowledge of the process. If you're going to refer someone, I know we're a little off script here, guys, bear with me. You don't have an obligation to get them an interview. You don't have an obligation to get them hired. You have an obligation to get their resume in front of a decision maker and make a recommendation, as I said. So if you are on the receiving end of that, if you're the hiring manager and someone who is known to you is in your pile, yeah, you've got to be aware of the relationship and go the extra mile. Or not talking euphemisms, you can't send them a text. You can't send them an email. You have to call them and say, hey, look, I'm sorry, you didn't make the next cut. We hope that that person is smart and professional and values relationships and does the right thing. And the right thing is to say, thank you so much for considering me. I appreciate it. And I need to write a thank you note to the person who was in between us that got me in front of you. And if there's something else that comes up, I'd love to be considered. But you know what? Really classy of you to give me a call. I really appreciate it. So you end on a high note, not on a, well, why didn't I? By the way, I'll mention this a couple more times during this cast, but we have a podcast that I credit Wendy for that I love called You Did Not Demonstrate, which is the right phrasing for how to tell someone that they didn't get considered, why they didn't get considered. If you're willing to give feedback to somebody about an interview, outside of the fact that they were really horrible and there were egregious things done or said, our guidance in the podcast, You Did Not Demonstrate, is the right approach. Okay, continuing on. Notify candidates yourself, if you're the hiring manager, once you decide to conduct a phone screen. Don't rely on HR setting up a phone screen for you if they conducted the resume screen. We have found historically, and interviewing is a high tension series of logistical events, three-party scheduling efforts where HR tells the candidate, call Mark or call Mike at this time or whatever. They're just much more likely to be logistically problematic. So HR and you decide, let's say HR is involved, and there are casts for that as well, guys. A lot of these casts are built around or designed to complement our new book, The Effective Hiring Manager, which came out in 2019. But this is an extension of that, obviously the title, The Missing Chapters. I could have written another 100 pages for the book, but I just thought, boy, I didn't want to write a textbook. Okay, so don't overreact to a candidate who calls or emails before a phone screen to request a change to the schedule. It happens, okay? Now, I'm not saying you can't react. I'm not saying you can't say, that's a bit of a surprise. I bet he wouldn't do that if I were his top opportunity. On the other hand, if somebody's pregnant, if a spouse is pregnant, if a kid gets hurt, there are legitimate reasons. A last-minute email is not appropriate, and it's not an overreaction to say, okay, this person's not interested. A candidate who reschedules 3 times better be being shot at or had better appear exceptional, and I don't think I actually would tolerate 3 times.
Yeah, I'm surprised you said that. It's like, I don't know how exceptional they'd have to be. 3 times is,
If Neil Armstrong had said to me, hey, can I reschedule? I'd have said, yeah. Of course, I would have never seen Neil Armstrong because Neil Armstrong doesn't have a resume, but there you go. When you phone screen a candidate, start by explaining to them this step in the process. Too many of us have the process in our heads, the 18 steps or the 9 steps or the 6 steps. And then we know that we're on step 3 and there are 4 parts to this step. The candidate doesn't know that. This is one of the most frustrating parts of communication in the world today. The asymmetrical level of knowledge between the speaker and the listener. And there's a great example of this where they did an experiment and they gave one group of people 4 songs. I think the songs were Happy Birthday, Silent Night, who knows, in the States, it'd probably be the Star Spangled Banner or something like that. And they said to them, okay, we want you to tap these songs, like you were playing drums, and we want to see how likely it is that the other person in the experiment figures out what song you're tapping out. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think people believed that the people who were doing the drumming, that they should have an 80% success rate. And they had like a 20% success rate because of what was in their head. They didn't immediately assume this is not in the other person's head. That's why I tell people all the time, please, when you're talking to me, give me some context. Paint me the picture at some point around the idea that's in your head, or, tell me what's around it so I can start building a picture that's cogent to me too. So in every step of the process, we want to tell them, hey, look, we're in this step. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. Here's how it fits in the big picture. It takes 1 minute. And it gives the candidate an understanding of where they are and why they're there. And essentially, they ought to be able to assume what the goal is. So you'll tell them, hey, look, this is a 30 to 45-minute phone call. And actually, you'll do this before. It's over phone. Actually, we do it by video. If you're smart, you'll do that. Tell them you're going to ask 2 to 5 questions. Tell them you may not have time to ask questions of us during a phone screen, but we'll certainly give you time to do that when you come in, if we take it to that step. You're going to hear this guidance that I'm giving you now in various forms throughout this process. The uncertainty of what is coming, the impenetrability of interviewers in the process, the lack of feedback, all creates more than enough stress for candidates, okay? Look, if you decide not to bring in a candidate after a phone screen, communicate that to them before you start conducting in-person interviews. The moment you start conducting in-person interviews, there's a chance that person will hear, you may not know it, but they may be best friends with the guy who's interviewing with you today, and they're going to assume the worst. They're going to assume A, that I'm out, and B, you didn't have the courage to tell them they were out. Now, is that what you would want? Would you want to find out that your buddy is in for an interview that day and you didn't even hear a peep? No, that's not what you'd want. And so how would a professional respond? Hey, look, we've decided to rule that guy out. Now, look, if you haven't decided to rule her out, call her and say, hey, look, I want to let you know you're still in the running. We have brought some people in. We're not bringing them in order of interest. We're bringing them in order of our schedule and logistics and so on. And I promise you, one way or the other, if you're either in or out, I will let you know. It's what you would want, and it's a grace note. It's the right thing to do, period.
Yeah, generally that's a good evaluation action. Yeah, it's the right thing. Yeah, I guess I'll do it.
The world is changing. You've probably read lots of stuff lately about cybersecurity, about hackers, about increasing security on information technology assets and activities. But if you're a manager and you don't have a good hiring engine, or you're a manager and you don't have a good, repeatable, sustainable management approach, these kinds of changes can make your world a lot harder. The way to address that and the changes going on in the world as a manager is to have knowledge and apply those skills on a regular basis. And that's what we do both at our public conferences and if you're a director above and you have a budget, bring us in for an on-site meeting. Come to our website to find out more. We hope to see you.
Okay, so that's pre-screening process, stressors. Right. How about the interview day itself? What are the stressors there, and what can we do to reduce stress in that case?
Yeah, well, the first thing you can do is start before the interviewing day, right? Call your candidate 1 to 2 days before the interview day and explain generally how their day will go. Right? This isn't hard.
Wait a minute, isn't this like secrets? I mean, you wouldn't want to open kimono on the process. I mean, it's a secret sauce, right?
It's so
they'd be able to game the system. We wouldn't want that.
Yeah. Well, there are two thoughts to that. One, it's so secret. There's a podcast that has 3 million listeners a month telling everybody what the process is. That's how secret it is. It's like a secret in Washington, D.C. That's funny.
And point two, Ozan, you're an idiot.
No. The other thing is that it's okay to engage in things that differentially impact your candidates. The worst candidates are not going to benefit from being told what the process is. They're not. The best candidates are. This helps us spread the field to help it make it easier for us to tell a great candidate from a good candidate.
Explain spreading the field. We've talked about that on other casts, but for those who haven't heard that before, could you explain that? Because it's an important point.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, if you look at it conceptually, it's ludicrous to think that what most people do is spend an hour with somebody and they can accurately predict that person's next 5 years. Stupid. I mean, I'm sorry, people. You don't know what's going on inside people's heads. Rule number 1, you don't know what's going on inside other people's heads. Rule number 2, you can't predict the future. Okay. You put those two things together, you're going to spend an hour with somebody and magically say, yes, they're going to kill it here, or no, they're horrible. No, you're wrong a lot. Okay. Get over it. Okay. So interviewing is an artificial reality. It is imperfect. It's not great. It's better than anything else we've ever had. For those of you who don't know, it was only invented 80 years ago. So it's not like interviewing, is this magical thing. We're human beings. It's a human system. It's imperfect. Okay. The more you practice, the better you get. But spreading the field, if you'll picture a bell curve, and you'll picture over to the right-hand side, the good side, the bell curve represents candidate performance and likely performance in the future, because candidate performance in an interview is we are saying it is a predictor of future behavior. Let's say we have 3 dots out to the right, but they're fairly close together. We want an interviewing process that makes it easy to tell best from second best. Please don't take that to mean I'm comparing candidates. I'm not. I'm comparing every candidate to the standard for the job. But what I want to do is I want to grab the 2 ends of that bell curve and pull on them and pull the bell curve apart. So wherever those 3 dots were on that bell curve, they're going to start spreading out. I want to make it easier for the best candidate. And potentially, I don't want it to make it harder. I don't need to do anything to make it harder. But I also, in theory, if I'm making it easier for the best candidate, I want to make it harder for the worst candidate. Not that the worst candidates would come in for an interview. It's worst in a relative sense. I want it to be easy for the candidate we are most likely to hire to distinguish herself from the second and third candidate that didn't make the criteria. This is particularly important if I'm training new people. I want the candidate who comes in, who we end up hiring, to be unanimous. And I want even the new people to go, wow, she was great. So spreading the field means having an interview process that rewards preparation, that rewards communication, since preparation and communication are endemic to every job I've ever had, and that makes it easier for us to feel better about our yes and no decisions. That's all that spreading the field is. So what does that mean specifically? You're going to tell them how their day will go. You'll start with me, quote, I'm quoting now, you'll start with me, but it won't be an interview. We'll just go over your precise schedule for the day. Then you'll have a series of interviews, most about an hour long. Several of us will go to lunch with you. And that also won't be an interview in the sense of question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. I don't know where we'll go yet for lunch. And then after some afternoon interviews, I'll be your last interview of the day. I'll send you a high level of your interviewing day by email so you can print it out and bring it with you. I'll also send over logistics for getting into the building, stuff like that. And if you want, guys, you can leave that as a voicemail, that message. Now, if you do get the candidate on the phone, you have the bonus opportunity to verify that they're coming. Are you looking forward to the day? We are here. Okay? Don't be shocked if you get lukewarm responses. Stress causes people to do and say funny things. On the other hand, be pleased if you get, gosh, I can't wait. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. There's some interviewing guidance for you there, folks. Okay. Then you're going to send out that general schedule you promised before they come in to interview. If they're flying in, you have to get it to them before they fly. Okay. If you have a detailed schedule worked out, send that. Okay. Now look, we're often told by people sending details like this out allows candidates to prepare by knowing professional details of some of all of their interviewers. And that's true. It allows people to prepare, but it's a misleading problem.
Why is that?
Well, look, not all candidates are going to take advantage of that knowledge. It's a spread in the field moment. Advantage to the more prepared candidate. That's good. Okay. I promise you, a candidate you don't deserve to hire, you oughtn't hire, cannot prepare themselves over the line. I don't believe it. Okay. Second, most candidates are not good enough communicators that they can use an interviewer's background in an interview in a way that benefits them. A candidate mentioning that they know where an interviewer went to school or the last place the interviewer worked isn't always handled well and frankly can come off clumsy or creepy even, okay? On the other hand, a candidate who looks up their interviewer's job histories on LinkedIn and then chooses different accomplishments for different interviewers' questions based on the interviewer's background, that's impressive. And you don't have to call attention to it. You're just tailoring your delivery to the audience you now know more about.
That suggests that's a better candidate if they can do that.
Exactly. Now look, this is important because I get this comment all the time. Well, interviewers should be all equal. Now, They shouldn't. If something we do to reduce unnecessary interview stress for all candidates, perhaps especially weak candidates, if that also provides even more benefit to the prepared candidate, that's a good thing. Fairness does not mean that the net result of our efforts is that all people benefit equally from our approach. That's it. I mean, fairness is not everybody gets the exact same interview. It's not. Every interview is going to be different because it's with different people. So don't get wrapped around the axle about fairness. Now, look, please pay special attention to not just the map location of where you're interviewing, but also the micro logistics of it. Where to park, which entrance to use. Heck, I used to send a picture of the building and say, this is the entrance. Okay. How to get through security, what to have to get through security, how long entrance to the building and getting to your floor takes. Look, guys, ideally, you have somebody meet them outside security. These are all stressors that you can reduce. Okay. At a minimum, guys, you've got to provide them somebody's cell number that they can text them to let them know they're on site. And whatever you do, don't give them a landline or a desk phone number for logistical questions. I can count in the hundreds the times that me and one of our team here were going to a client site and couldn't get in and didn't have a cell number of anyone in the building we were meeting or training at. Oh, sure, we had a cell number for somebody else. They worked 5 miles away, different campus. Takes them a half an hour to get there. Half an hour that the interviewee will essentially get punished for. It's not their fault. It's poor logistics preparation on our part and an additional stressor the candidate doesn't need.
Yeah, unless you have a job where people change their office every week, and part of the success is their ability to find the office that's moved every week, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I'm sure we have lots of listeners like that. Okay. Look, as we recommended in the Effective Hiring Manager book, start the candidate's day with a short briefing, walking them through their schedule. Give them a written copy. Explain how to get from location to location. Give them cell phone numbers of people and point out places they can go or people will help them get to whom they need to see. Now you're saying, oh, wait, they're going to have everybody's cell phone number. Yes, they are. And tell your people that after the fact, if they get a text or a call, you say, hey, listen, I don't know. If you haven't heard, that's a good thing. And you have our word, we're going to get back to you in a timely way. It's not a problem. And look, don't leave candidates to wander around and expect them to figure things out. Again, this is a case where you know what's in your head, the map of your office, and they don't. They don't know where they are. Instruct interviewers to be respectful of the candidate's time. You got to tell your interviewers, most of whom likely work for you, to finish on time and get the candidate to their next interview on time. Don't let your team's poor management cause the candidate to be evaluated negatively because they didn't get to every interview because your people didn't know how to manage time. There's nothing that happens in a candidate interviewee's day outside of very unusual circumstances where it's the interviewee's fault. It's just not. It's the hiring company's fault. If logistics go awry, apologize. It happens. Give them time to go to the bathroom, for heaven's sakes. Have scheduled time for them to eat. Provide water for them to drink during the day. It doesn't have to be during every interview, but don't expect them to go from 8 a.m. to noon without drinking. Guys, smile when you interview. Tell your directs who are interviewing during the day before they go in, smile at the candidate. Look, if you don't smile, even if your culture isn't an exceptionally friendly one, you can't complain about a higher loss rate when you make offers. Candidates don't want to work in unhappy places with unhappy people. In fact, I'm amazed. CEOs are describing their companies and they're saying fun, chill, cool. I always wonder, I'm like, when am I ever hear an interview with a CEO where she says, our big, how would I describe our culture? Effective. You know, come on, chill. Yeah, we have a chill environment. I don't know. By the way, I never believe that. I never believe that. Well, I do if they're going out of business. Um, okay. So everybody smiles some every day. It's the human condition. The complete absence of smiling, which, for a period of time happens frequently for various reasons like seriousness, lack of preparation, misguided stoicism on the part of the interviewer. I'm important. I'm making a decision. You will see a stone face. Or even superiority is a big turnoff for candidates. I don't know what happened in the human condition. Some sociologist ought to tell me why people in power think that not smiling is somehow an indicator of their power, but I don't know. I've always thought it was dumb. Look, guys, it's completely possible to conduct an interview with exceptionally high standards without it being perceived as tough or rude or unfair. Period. But if you don't smile, you increase your chances of getting all these comments as feedback, tough, rude, unfair, while losing good candidates. I'm always surprised when people challenge me on this next one, but guys, you gotta forgive occasional interview mistakes. If they call you by the wrong name, it's not the end of the world. Half the people in the world aren't naturally good with names, and this is a higher than normal stress situation.
I agree, Joe.
Yeah. If they have 6 interviews and one of the people gets all the names right and the other person doesn't remember anybody's name, can that be a slight discriminator? Yes. But it's not a big deal. Okay. And look, there's surely more we can do the day of the interview, but this is a pretty good high level, and most of managers that my experience aren't doing but 30% of them. So increase to 60% in the next year and 100% over the course of the next 2 years, you'll be in much better shape.
Yeah. And, what a good thing if somebody does not get hired and had a great interview process and goes and tells their friends, like, I didn't get hired, but these guys were impressive.
They're good. They're good.
I got out of the Army. God, I hate saying this because it's a failure on my part, but I interviewed, one of the companies I interviewed with, Michelin, and those guys were professional. My God, what an incredible experience that was. And I didn't get a follow-up. And
yeah.
I was crushed. But because of that, Michelin is still my favorite tire. Not because I've studied tires and I know a good tire from a bad tire.
Yeah, they're good people. They make
It was impressive. And if there's anybody at Michelin, I love you guys, and I'm still so sad.
It's good. That's part of what interviewing is. It's an exposure to the company.
Absolutely.
And you can't fake this stuff, guys. You can't be a jerk 99 days out of the year and then smile and put on a happy face and convince people. Or if you do, you're going to have turnover and retention problems later. Okay, next step. What do we do after the interview is done? Okay, how do we reduce follow-up stressors? The reason we have to cover this is candidate stress doesn't stop when the interviewing stops. Some would say it increases because now they have little or no way to influence the outcome they want. They're just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for something to happen, and they assume they will never hear a thing, and that ticks them off. Look, the standard way of interviewing, ending an interview day, is to thank a candidate for coming in, tell them you'll get back to them as soon as you've made a decision. But actually, guys, think about it for a minute. That heightens the candidate's stress because they've heard that before, and they know that's coming, and they know what's coming next. Nothing. No answer, no communication, no responses to inquiries. If that isn't what we'd want to hear, why would we do it to other people? Okay, hey, because I'm the boss and I can. Yeah, next thing you know, you'll be an imperious, uncommunicative boss. Good for you. Before your candidate leaves, tell them what's going to happen and how long it's going to take. Tell them about your interview results capture meeting. There's a cast for that. Give them your cell phone number. If you really don't want to do that, give them your desk phone number. Tell them if they have questions to call. If you're worried about what kind of questions they're going to ask or what you'll say, tell them if you call me and I don't respond, that means nothing has changed in their status and It may take as much as a month, if it will, or 2 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever. And if you don't hear from me, it's because I don't want to burden you with, hey, nothing's happened. Now, the other side of that coin, if you want to be taken seriously, if you want to be believed, for heaven's sake, if they've been eliminated, call them and tell them so. Now, you'd say, oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, sure, because you get paid to do what you want? I don't think so. I think you get paid to do what's effective. And it's the right thing to do, as Wilford Brimley would say. We have a cast for that situation, so you don't have to go into that conversation naked. How to turn down a candidate. Tell you exactly what to do. If you want to give feedback, more details with a candidate, we encourage you to try. No need to do it, no requirement to do it. Ask yourself what you would want. Again, the way to communicate that is with our cast, you did not demonstrate. There's a best way to handle multiple candidates that have made it over the bar, that are worthy of offers, even if you only have one to give, and that's called How to Handle Two Viable Job Candidates. That's a podcast. Whatever you do, don't leave people hanging. You don't have any requirement to communicate every 3 days. Now, if somebody blows your socks off, you might want to consider communicating to them every 3 days. Hey, look, we haven't heard anything. We're still interviewing. I want you to know you did well, and so on. Final step, what about onboarding? There's some stressors in onboarding. Now, it's not interviewing stress. Interviewing stress goes away once you've made an offer. But it's now replaced by onboarding stressors, both for you, surprise, and your new hire. They're wondering about their job, their colleagues, their future success. And we cover all that, guys, in annoying detail. Hey, this is Maynard Tools. You can find at least 10 podcasts in our map of the universe about onboarding and hiring, okay? Actually, I think you can find 10 about onboarding and 10 about offering and declining and so on. And you may be able to find 100 about hiring. But keep in mind, there's a new stress, and that's on us. We've made the investment to hire somebody. So, as I like to tell people, it'd be crazy to put your best foot forward and then drag the other one behind it, and then therefore lose the candidate. So, minimum thing, I'm going to leave it to the onboarding series to help you with that. And by the way, if you're a licensee, you should know the onboarding series of casts includes access to our onboarding checklist, which is an interactive Excel spreadsheet with over 200 tasks in it. And so we've pre-populated your onboarding process, and you can just go through and get rid of the ones that don't apply to you. It's all dated. It's all time-stamped. It turns green and amber and red. It's super, super cool. I think it's fun. And it's simple technology. Anybody could figure it out. So, but the bottom line here is you have to communicate with your new hire at least every 3 days from the time she said yes until the time she starts.
Believe me, folks, you want to do this from personal experience.
Yeah. How long was it between the acceptance date and the start date for that kid?
Just look, it's like,
roughly.
It was like 2.5 months or something.
Yeah, now, look, guys, there's nothing wrong with that. There are vagaries of the system that causes that to happen. There's hiring classes. There's all kinds of things that affect that. But 2.5 months is a recipe for disaster.
And it was. And folks, you don't know this if you haven't heard the story. What we're getting at is I had hired a manager to take over a pretty important piece of the organization. I knew this person. I had known him. He had worked for me before. And he was on board. He accepted the offer. 2.5 months later, I called him, a few days before he's supposed to show up. And he said he got a counteroffer and he had accepted it. And I was sad and embarrassed. Sad. I called Mark and he goes, What? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I thought you were smart.
Yeah. Oh, well, you're smart in other ways. Yeah. So look, guys, it doesn't have to be you calling every 3 days. Spread it around amongst your directs. Have them play a significant role, the candidate, in their own onboarding, which will include plenty of communications with the people they'll be working with. Build ties for them to the people so it'll be harder for them to break them. But more importantly, it'll help them to come up to effectiveness faster. Hiring, interviewing, all this stuff, we always focus on the stressful part, the interview part. From an organizational conceptual perspective, guys, the person in the role is not important. It's the work that's getting done that's necessary to allow the organization to continue that matters. From the moment that previous person leaves until the replacement is up to speed is what the gap is. And we need to narrow that gap. We can narrow it by hiring faster. There's all kinds of things. We can narrow it by getting yeses more often, and some of that would come out of this cast today. We can narrow that by bringing them up to speed more quickly once they come on board. Okay, let me just summarize. Guys, you know this, but it's sometimes not obvious. Interviewing stress comes fully supplied from our candidates. We don't need to do anything to add stress. In fact, it's less than professional to do it. But most importantly, it gives us worse results. Win the close battles with other firms vying for your favorite candidates by reducing stress, showing them you're going to be a great place to work. And that's our guidance.
That's excellent, dude. I enjoyed that.
It's fun. Good fun.
All right, my friend. Well, I hope you feel better soon.
I'm ready to go play golf.
All right.
Folks, in keeping with our recent tradition, we have to highlight one of our longtime licensees, a friend of mine, Francesco Vadana from Italy. Francesco, you and I have been corresponding for the last 13, 14, maybe even 15 years. You're a professional, a gentleman. I love the way you respect your family and you make career choices that are commensurate with that. And we are lucky to have you as part of the Manager Tools community. Francesco Vadana. Thank you, sir.
Great guy. Yeah. Thank you for being our friend for so long.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week, guys.